Welcome to the Overdog Podcast. The Dogs are 9-0 after a hard-fought victory against Missouri. I was there. Apparently, some of the people sitting at home and some of the people sitting in the stands weren't pleased with the consistent volume level of the crowd. I've heard it louder at Sanford Stadium. I put together a clip because I didn't watch the TV copy until today. I put together clips of the announcers talking about how loud the crowd was throughout the game. I don't really think it was that big of an issue. One issue I do have with is people who are sitting at the house criticizing stadium noise. Don't ask other people to do what you're not willing to do yourself. If you want the stadium to be loud, show up and be loud. It's really not complicated. I feel like that's just basic adulting, is if you want something done, don't ask other people to do what you're not willing to do yourself. I think it's important to reiterate that. It was loud and it was fine. It lulled at times. There were times in that game where Missouri, frankly, took the crowd out of the game because they were playing pretty well. And it's homecoming. A lot of the older crowd come for homecoming. And regardless, it would take a lot for Missouri to become a matchup that Georgia gets excited about. Nobody was really excited when Missouri joined the SEC. Missouri won the SEC East twice, and most people don't know that. They don't remember that. And also, they don't care. They're just not an exciting brand. It doesn't mean that they're not a good program and a good football team. I think Eli Drinkwitz has done a good job, and I think there'll be a problem for years to come with the way that they're recruiting. They're getting kids that Georgia wants, but it's just about brand recognition, and they don't really have it. They're probably the least popular program in the SEC. And I would even put them ahead of Vanderbilt because at least people enjoy going to Vanderbilt. It's one of the best away game trips in the country. So I think it all factors in. But overall, the crowd was fine. I think it'll be better this weekend. We're just hoping that weather holds up. I am planning to be there. I told my mother I would take her to a game, and I'm worn out, boy. I've been going to games. A lot more games than I intended on going to this year because, frankly, a lot of the home games have been better matchups than I expected them to be. Looking at the schedule back in May, I was like, man, this schedule is garbage. And it hasn't been great, but it's been a little bit better than I expected for it to be, which is good. Gotten a little bit of a back and forth with the what's that coming down the track versus the who's that coming down the track crowds. And I want to address it. I've addressed it before, I think. But it's what's that coming down the track. That is correct. I understand that a lot of most of our fan base says, who's that coming down the track? I posted a video of Pat McAfee stating from memory when he was at Georgia last year, he learned it. And he started off saying, he said who's, and then he switched to what's that coming down the track. And I made a snide remark about how a lot of y'all don't like Pat McAfee, but at least he calls the Dogs correctly from memory. And some people didn't like that, and I understand that a lot of you, even though you know what's that coming down the track is right, you just say who's that coming down the track for God knows what reason. You just want to say it your way. And there's a part of me that respects that. It is wrong. It irritates me to no end, but I know there's nothing I can do to make you say it right. I feel like it doesn't make our fan base look great. It's a basic tradition, and we're getting it wrong. And I, to this day, have not heard a good reason as to why anyone would purposefully say it incorrectly. Here's what I think happened. I think at some point over the last 15 to 20 years, people just started saying, who's that coming down the track? It's an easy mistake to make. What's that coming down the track? Who's that coming down the track? It is. It's an easy mistake to make. Others picked up on it. It snowballed. Nobody corrected them. I've even gotten emails from the athletic department where the header is, who's that coming down the track? Did I respond with a profanity-laced response? Respond with a response. I couldn't think of another word. I'm not going to comment on on how I responded to that. But I was told that I would be taken off the listserv, but I'm still on there because they still wanted my money for football tickets. So, and I probably overreacted. I don't correct people anymore. I have corrected people in public. Usually goes fine. One time it almost became a bar fight, which was not my intent. I was just trying to spread the word. I thought initially that people would want to get it right. Now I realize this is America. People don't like being told what to do, and they're going to say what they're going to say. And doubling down on being wrong is a lot of what the American dream is. So, but I have heard, just to get into some of the arguments that don't make any sense to me. First of all, from my perspective, people who are on my side, they'll say, well, a mean machine in red and black is a what, not a who, so grammatically, what's makes sense. I don't care about the grammar. What's that coming down the track is correct. If it was originally who's that coming down the track, I'd be fine with that too. I don't care about the grammar. We say, how about them dogs? That's not grammatically correct. We spell dogs differently and really incorrectly. So it's not about grammar for me. This isn't an English class. It's just about what's correct and what's incorrect. Somebody told me one time that whose sounds better to them. I feel like that's weird. I don't have a preference when it comes to interrogatives. Who, what, where, when, why, how, they're all just words. I don't think any of them sound better than the other one. And I think that's a weird perspective to have. I think anyone who thinks that whose sounds better probably just thought that who's that coming down the track was correct, and that's what they've heard a lot, because I really think about 3/4 of our fan base gets this wrong. Some of you on purpose. Again, I kind of respect that, even though I hate it. But you only think whose sounds better because you thought it was right for a long time, probably. Otherwise, I don't know why you would have a favorite interrogative, like you're just ranking. What's your third favorite interrogative? When? Is that your third favorite, or is it your second favorite? But it is what's that coming down the track. If you don't believe me, ask anyone in the Redcoat Band, or just look up the Redcoat Band on YouTube. It's actually the band chant. We call it calling the dogs. I don't know if that's correct or not. If it's not, I am open to being wrong about that, and I will correct myself, unlike a lot of you. But it is what's that coming down the track, and they say it every week at the dog walk or at every home game. And I don't want to say I'll give up, because I do wish that as a fan base we would get that right. But I also have come to terms with the fact that we probably never will ever get that right, and it just seems like it's too far gone. But as long as the Dogs keep winning on the football field, that's really all that matters. I got into it a little bit with Alabama over the Jaden Daniels injury, because I was told and have been told for the last 2 years that if a player from the opposing team gets injured and you beat them, then the win does not count. And in Jaden Daniels' case, he is one of the best quarterbacks in the country, playing the most important position on the field. To put that into perspective, Georgia's best player, at least on offense, and maybe overall, is Brock Bowers. I don't think anybody would dispute that. It would be a much bigger loss if Georgia lost Carson Beck, because he plays quarterback and it's the most important position. Doesn't mean Carson Beck is better than Brock Bowers. Carson Beck's a very good player, but Bowers, even though he's going to go a lot higher in the NFL draft than Carson Beck, it is a bigger loss. Alabama fans have been telling us for 2 years that Georgia's championship shouldn't count because Jamison Williams and John Mechie got injured. And I haven't checked this week, but George Pickens was playing on one leg in that championship game, less than 10 months off of an ACL repair. And in the NFL this year, where everyone has been cleared since August, although Jamison Williams was suspended for a few games, despite Jamison Williams and John Mechie combining to play more games than George Pickens, Pickens has way more receptions, yards, and touchdowns than both of those guys combined. Georgia didn't have him at full strength at any point in 2021. That's neither here nor there. The argument that Jamison Williams at wide receiver is a bigger loss than Jaden Daniels at quarterback, who is I believe still is a Heisman candidate, and I think he could still win the award because he played really well against Alabama, who I still think has a pretty good defense. I just don't get it. If that's the argument that you want to make, at least be consistent. Now, what I personally believe is Georgia, especially given Georgia's long list of injuries, including George Pickens, who was not 100% and still had an impact on the game, and actually played less snaps than Jamison Williams in the national championship game. Williams was healthy when he was playing before he tore his ACL. Pickens had a very similar impact. You could even argue it was a slightly greater impact on the game, even though Pickens was not 100%. I think that I've always said Georgia's win counts. It matters. There's no asterisk because of Jamison Williams, and there's no asterisk next to Alabama's win over LSU simply because Jaden Daniels got hurt. Now we can talk about whether or not it was targeting. I personally think that it was targeting, like helmet-to-helmet contact on a defenseless player, maybe even launched himself. That said, I think that hit should be legal. I don't think we should be throwing anyone out of a game for it. And that was Dallas Turner for Alabama that made the hit on Jaden Daniels. It may have, I don't know if it broke his jaw, dislocated his jaw. I don't think we should even be flagging that play. But by the letter of the rule and the law, it looked like targeting to me. And they reviewed it and said it wasn't. So maybe they had some better angles that convinced them that it was not targeting. But I thought it probably should have been. But that said, I wish they would never throw anybody out for that kind of a football play because I think it's just a good football play. On to the Missouri game. I was sitting in the stands. Again, wasn't as loud as I've ever heard Sanford Stadium. But I stood up and yelled. We made ourselves known when Georgia was on defense. First, with the negative, I really felt like Missouri's running back, Cody Schrader, he broke a lot of tackles. And there was a lot of good players like Michael Williams and Jamon Dumas-Johnson and C.J. Allen, who he was running through their tackles. And credit to that young man. And now he's a good player. He has 919 yards on the season. I just was not familiar with him before Saturday, and I don't really follow Missouri football that closely. But he has only had that was his third 100-yard game of the year against a Power 5 opponent. So it's not like he's absolutely just been lighting it up, but he is over 900 yards on the year and 10 touchdowns, but he was huge for Missouri. It troubles me a little bit that they were able to run that stretch play to the outside consistently. Georgia's edges are going to have to be better because as good as Cody Schrader is, I'm not sure that he's going to be nearly as good as a player like Quinshon Judkins is going to be. And I mean, last year, Quinshon Judkins was arguably the best back in the SEC. He went for 102 yards and 3 touchdowns last week against Texas A&M in a game that it looked like Ole Miss might lose. But I will say Judkins does have less yards than Cody Schrader. Judkins is just short of 800 yards. I'm not sure if he's missed time for injury this year, but Georgia's going to have their hands full. I do believe that Ole Miss is going to be missing an offensive tackle, one of their better players actually, which should work in Georgia's favor. But Kendall Milton, I thought looked really good. I thought I heard something about him maybe tweaking an injury. Hopefully he's 100% and able to go. Him and Dejon Edwards both averaged about 5 yards a carry and were really big in the win over Missouri. Really hoping we get Amarius Mims back. The tackle spot has just not been great. Truss has had a couple of rough games, and Mims is a first-round talent. He's at least a day one talent, and all accounts are that he could have maybe played this past weekend. So I really do hope to see him back. It's nothing against Truss. I think he's a decent player, and he's worked really hard, and he's given a lot for this program. Maybe bumping him back into guard is going to be the solution short term, but Dylan Fairchild and Micah Morris have looked really good at guard. Tate Rowledge seems to be holding his own, so I'm not sure what you do there. But I do think that getting Mims back would be big for the Ole Miss game. As for Missouri, the fans weren't happy with the possession right before halftime. Georgia staff called timeouts to preserve clock, and then when they got the ball back with about 2 minutes left, it was 2 runs up the middle and then an off-target slant route that did not go for a first down, and then we're punting back to Mizou. It wasn't booing in the stadium, but people, they weren't really happy with it. It was just sort of confusing. I guess the thinking is, in that scenario, let's see if we can pop one of these runs for a big gainer, and then we'll start throwing the ball downfield. If not, then we'll just play for halftime. I don't hate it. Ended up working out in the end. Georgia won. They didn't cover, which I didn't bet on them to cover, I don't think. So it doesn't really matter as long as you get out of there with a win. I will say 2 of Missouri's 3 sacks, though, I think it was the first one and the third one. Beck's got to get rid of the ball. There were some throws in this game that he just missed, including the slant. I think the sun might have been in Dominique Lovett's eyes a little bit, but it still was not a good throw. There was a couple that he just threw too short, skipped off the ground, overthrew, and then the 2 sacks. And Beck's not going to be perfect. I don't expect him to be perfect, but I feel like throwing the ball away before you get sacked should be one of the easier parts of playing quarterback. I also feel like if you're rolling out to the right, the dumbest play a quarterback can make, and Carson didn't do this, but the dumbest play a quarterback can make is running out of bounds for a 3-yard loss instead of just throwing the ball across the line of scrimmage. I see that a lot, and it really drives me crazy. Well, Carson's not doing anything that bad, but I do think you got to have an internal clock, and even if you're just throwing the ball away, he's got to stop taking sacks. I'm sure they're going over that in practice, but that's just stuck out to me that he held the ball a little bit too long. Again, Georgia was without Brock Bowers. Is he going to play this Saturday? I don't know. Apparently he could if he needed to. Now, they might hold him out just as an abundance of caution, but apparently he has worked his way back and could be ready to play if Georgia needed him. So it'd be great to see Bowers and Mims back. I hope we at least see Mims, though. The rest were bad all around on Saturday. There was a couple of phantom, I felt like, defensive pass interferences that went against Georgia and one went against Missouri. The one that went against Missouri, I thought, watching the replay, it probably was defensive pass interference, but the way the ball was thrown, it wasn't going to be complete anyway. So I guess they could have called holding. But overall, I was not impressed with the officiating. They tried to call an offensive pass interference, and then they took forever to review it. And it was just it was not a good performance by the officials. But that's typical SEC officiating. We see that a lot. Overall, I did think whether or not Georgia covered, Carson Beck, 254 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, didn't turn the ball over. Special teams was really good. Peyton Woodring has since the beginning of the season, he struggled a little bit. He has been automatic and hit 2 big field goals in the second half to push that game, especially that last one, to make it a 2-possession game. That was huge, because if Missouri gets the ball back down 6, a lot of different stuff could happen. What is going on? The ad blocker's jumping at me here. I don't need this right now. I'm trying to look at stats here. There we go. Again, Kendall Milton, Dejon Edwards. Didn't see Dylan Bell get any carries today. Ladd McConkey was huge again. Ra Thomas and Dominique Lovett seem like they're pretty much going to be the go-to guys in this offense outside of Ladd. Ladd's the consistent, always going to be there, but it does seem like Ra and Dominique have stepped in right behind him. Marcus Rosemy, Jack Saint, only had the 1 catch for 18 yards. He's more of your safety net possession receiver. Mekhi Muse and Dylan Bell did a great job returning kicks. Dylan Bell did fumble the first kickoff, but he picked it up and it avoided disaster. But losing Jamon Dumas-Johnson, I feel like this hadn't been talked about a ton. That's going to be a big loss, because you're basically going to be relying on C.J. Allen and Raylan Wilson, 2 true freshmen who have been around. They might bump Jalen Walker back in there. He's a sophomore. But it's young guys. And we'll see how that goes. I don't know what they're going to do with him medically. I actually haven't seen anything about it. I know Thomas Davis, the former Georgia safety who went on to a long NFL career at linebacker, in order to play in the Super Bowl, I think it was the 2015 Super Bowl, they sliced his arm open and just put a rod in there. I'm not sure how long he had to heal, and then they just sewed it back up. I'm not sure how long he had to heal there. I don't know if they're thinking about doing something like that with Jamon Dumas-Johnson. I'm not sure how common that surgery is. And he's not going to play this week, and I don't know how soon we could get him back. But that's a veteran. That's a guy who has won 2 national championships. That's a guy who was one of the main guys on the field last year when Georgia won their 2nd national championship. Didn't play much the year before. He was a freshman sitting behind all those NFL linebackers we had. But that's going to be a big loss. Smile Munn is going to have to step up and be big. And the defensive line, how about Nazir Stackhouse? Man, what a great play to see a young man like that who's been sitting behind NFL talent for years come up big and really help put the game away. Unfortunately, the run got called back, but really when the run gets called back, Georgia has more space to work with to run more clock, and they end up getting a field goal. But that's a lot of fun watching a guy make a play like that. And Julian Humphrey had a really good game. He's got to be better in run support. The touchdown run by Schrader looked like he got turned around and maybe blocked into the end zone a little bit. At first, I thought he just got pancaked in the end zone, but really he got run off by the receiver. You got to make a read and be able to come up and set the edge there. But I thought he did a great job in coverage. And the one of the pass interference calls that went against him, I thought was BS. And initially didn't look like he got his head around, but on the replay, he actually did get his head around. Didn't make any significant contact. It looked like they could have called pass interference on the offense, which was Luther Burden, who is one of the best receivers in the country. I think it should have been a no call. But I was really impressed with him. Dalen Everett had kind of a tough day, but again, watching the replay, he was really right there. He got beat on a corner route by Theo Weiss, kind of put him in the mixer and got wide open. But there was a couple of passes that were just right on the money. He had his hand in there. They were catches, and they were on him, and you got to rip that ball out. But even the touchdown pass to Luther Burden, he was right there swiping at the ball, and Burden just, I don't know how he caught that ball when I rewatched the game. So safeties were big. Javon Bullard had the interception to really seal the win for Georgia. It's Ole Miss they probably should have lost this past weekend, but they didn't. 38-35, they beat Texas A&M. Jackson Dart had 387 yards and 2 touchdowns. He could pose a real problem for Georgia. If Georgia can't put pressure on him and get to him, Quinshon Judkins had 102 yards and 3 touchdowns. Again, they might be without their left, I don't know if it's left tackle or right tackle who might be out. But Trey Harris is going to be the guy to keep an eye on. 213 yards receiving against Texas A&M. He also had a touchdown. He is a really talented receiver, and I'm not super familiar with what he's done over the course of the year, but just watching the highlights of the Texas A&M game, he was making some NFL catches, so he's going to be a problem. For Georgia's defense, Georgia's secondary, which brings me to Lane Kiffin, Ole Miss's coach. Looks like he might be in a little bit of hot water. There was a player who apparently Lane was trying to get rid of, and the kid goes MIA for a few weeks, says he's having a mental health break. He comes back, and initially I just heard audio of Lane Kiffin basically telling the kid to get the F out of his office, which is not insane to hear from a high-level football coach, or really a football coach at any level. High school coaches say stuff like that. I didn't think too much of it. I've worked in athletics, and I hear stuff like that all the time. It didn't really move me at all. Then I read the transcript, and it looked like Lane was trying to get rid of the kid anyway. So the timeline is strange to me, but I think ultimately it's going to come out looking bad on Lane. I'm not sure that he cares. In fact, it seems like he doesn't, according to his Twitter activity, where he's tweeting out articles about Ole Miss and how they don't have anything to lose against Georgia. But initially, I don't want to say I defended Lane, but I just didn't care about the situation. I thought it was a kid who was just using mental health, perhaps as an excuse to get out of practice. But as I read the transcript a little bit more, it seems like there's at least some documentation that shows that this kid might have actually been having some mental health issues, and Lane may have been trying to get rid of him, and they're having a back and forth. So, and apparently the kid has sued Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss for like $40 million. Not sure that's going to go anywhere, because ultimately, unless he had an NIL deal for $40 million, I'm not really sure what grounds you're going to be asking for that kind of money on. But we'll see. Will it be a distraction for Ole Miss? Probably not. Things like this don't seem to matter in the long run to coaches like Lane Kiffin, who really probably just doesn't care. He's going to do what he wants to do, and it's like Jim Harbaugh at Michigan. I think they're going to come out and probably play pretty well against Penn State and not care about any of the noise that's going on around their spying scandal. So, but we'll see how it goes. There probably should be some interesting signs for College Game Day in Athens. I think they're coming to Athens. I don't know. I don't watch College Game Day. Some of y'all complain about College Game Day. I haven't paid. I mean, I'll turn it on, but I haven't paid attention to it in years. I've switched back and forth between all those bad shows. And SEC Network is actually where I tend to land. I think they do a pretty good job. But none of them are just blowing me away with how great their coverage is. But we appreciate you joining us. Sorry we didn't get a show in last week. I was recording and the audio went out halfway through, and I had to get home to my wife, and I didn't have time to fix it. So Dawgs big win over Florida, though. Don't have time to go over that. We're moving forward. We're moving ahead. We got Ole Miss this weekend. If you want the stadium to be loud, BYA, baby. Bring your ass to the stadium and make some noise. Otherwise, don't complain about it on Twitter. Thank you for joining us, and we will catch you next time.